Well, I mean, clearly it's the volume, right? The amount of letters that are coming out. It hasn't been seen in 15 years at least. I think the previous record was 52 letters in 2010. And now we definitely beat that last year. And, it's 22 letters this year. We're on track to hit something like 40 or 50 letters.
Hi, everyone. I'm Virginia Foley, founder of Compliance Forward. Today, I'm joined by senior consultant Jason Cober, and we're super excited. We have our special guest, John Driscoll. Hi, John. For those of you who may not know you, I think you're pretty popular, but for those who don't know you, can you give us a little bit of detail on your background and tell us about your project, OPDP Resources?
Sure. My name is John Driscoll, and I'm a consultant in advertising promotion review for pharma and biotech companies. I've been doing advertising promotion review for over 20 years now, and actually more years now as a consultant than as an employee. I finally hit that mark. In 2013, I wrote a book for RAPS called FDA Requirements for Prescription Drug Promotion, which some people may still have, I think. And then most recently, last year, I built and have launched a website called OPDP Resources, which is a subscription website with basically all the letters. It's over 1,100 letters now that OPDP and formerly DDMAC and Appleby from CBER, all the letters that they've ever released publicly. And yeah, that's what I've been up to recently.
And that's perfect segue because we wanted to invite you today because of the letters. We've been having a lot of letters in the enforcement space. In fact, since September, there's been close to 100 letters coming out from OPDP and Appleby. It's a question to both of you because you're both experts in the space. What stands out to you as the most notable developments since FDA announced the crackdown on DTC advertising, which was almost a year ago now?
Well, I mean, clearly it's the volume, right? The amount of letters that are coming out. It hasn't been seen in 15 years at least. I think the previous record was 52 letters in 2010. And now we definitely beat that last year. And 22 letters this year. We're on track to hit something like 40 or 50 letters. I just think the volume itself is pretty unprecedented.
Definitely.
Everyone's been wild.
Yeah. Jason, what are your thoughts on kind of what's notable?
Yeah, what stands out to me is how they've changed the contents of the letters. Starting in September, we saw a pretty significant shift in the things that were included in the letters. We don't see legal citations any longer. We don't see the public health statement any longer. We don't see prior communications outside of the warning letters now. And those prior communications can be used to signal did a company submit advisory comments and were they given advisory comments on a particular presentation. So I think overall the shift in what they've cut from these letters, they've done that out of expediency. Cutting out a lot of that content helps them get these letters out faster. But it's not entirely clear why they're doing it, if that's the only motivation. Overall, I think any kind of lack of information in these letters, the reduction in the information that they're communicating, it does make it a little bit more difficult to understand the agency's position on these violations. But that, I think, has been what stood out to me most is how they've changed these letters.
Excellent points. It's almost like you could say we're entering into a new era. Jason, you and I have talked about this offline many times, that there have been these kind of like succinct time points or eras of OPDP enforcement. And I think what we're describing here is definitely a new era. What stands out? How would you characterize the current era of where we're in right now? Jason first.
Yeah, so I think when we look back in time, you see, as John said, there was a big uptick in letters in 1999, 2000, 2001, the early 2000 timeframe. I think typically that's when we've seen the most number of letters coming out of the agency. We saw another spike around 2009, 2010. And then after the Coronia case, things kind of dropped off and we saw a lot more legalese, if you will. There was a lot more legal review involved, a lot more legal citation, a lot more substantiation of these violations from a legal perspective. But we also saw a decrease in the number of letters that were coming out of the agency. in September of last year in 2025, there's been a pretty significant shift. What we're seeing now are a lot more violations citing things like quality of life or CCN type violations. These are much more subjective and areas where the agency has not issued a lot of guidance. The CCN final rule, of course, came out a couple of years ago, but the interpretability of the 5 factors in the CCN final rule, to a certain extent, very subjective. And we're seeing that lack of consistency in how those standards are being applied across OPDP and Appleby.
Interesting. And so thinking back to the crackdown, they made a big splash, the administration being they, about coming heavy after industry. Have they hit on every point that they were talking about?
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly DTC television advertising is their number one priority. I mean, and not just in September, but continuously since then, the vast majority of the letters are TV related. And I think the clear, conspicuous, neutral rule gives them a framework, at least, to more aggressively pursue it than perhaps maybe they had felt before. But it's clearly also just a priority for the administration. FDA at the time in September, when they talked about their focus on DTC, they also said that they were going to be going after social media and influencers and some of those other promotional tactics that we haven't yet really seen enforcement on. So it's not clear whether they've dropped that as a priority. They're focused on television. An issue for influencers is often if you're trying to determine whether the influencer has a relationship with the company, that can take some diligence outside of the typical 20 to 53 submission. You actually need to maybe contact the company or contact the influencer and figure that out. So maybe that is a reason why some of that type of enforcement has been slower. It's hard to know.
Time will tell. Jason, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when we look at the different press releases. They issued so much content on September 9th. The agency, not just FDA, but HHS as well. Marty McCary did a number of television interviews the week of September 9th. He did a number of op-eds. There's just so much content that the agency put out in conjunction with this. And right now, I don't know that we've seen a meaningful change in the targets of these compliance letters. As John said, there was a lot of talk in these press releases about targeting influencers, targeting generative AI chatbots, targeting dark web ads, targeting all these different types of promotion. But over the last 9-10 months, we've still seen the same type of compliance letters coming out of OPDP and Appleby. So I think that's the big question. How and when are we going to see a change in these different enforcement strategies?
Agreed. I don't want to poke the bear, but it feels like it's not impacting that much. I mean, my view hasn't gone down. Let's just say that. I'd love to talk about OPDP Resources some more. It's not a paid promotion, but I do use the tool myself and I use it weekly. And I'm just, Jason and I were talking about it and we're curious, John, what's the genesis? Like, how did you come up with it? And how long did it take you to kind of put it all together?
Well, I essentially wanted to build the database that I wish had existed through most of my career, because as anyone who knows this area knows, it's very hard to find information on the FDA website. And at one point it was easier. And now certainly any of the older letters, which are now on the Internet Archive, it's almost impossible to search them. And it's very hard to find the examples. We're always looking for examples to cite. When I was writing the RAPS book, I basically built my own little database on my own computer of PDFs so that I could try to find information and be able to give lots of examples of enforcement on particular issues. And I've always kind of maintained that as a consultant. But essentially in the last few years with the development of AI, which I track pretty closely just as personally, I realized that the time was now when I could develop a website database at the quality level that I wanted it to be, and not just sort of searching through PDF or not just searching text, but actually like really useful ways of organizing this information so that, professionals like me, and I assume a lot of your audience would be able to just get their fingers on the right letter at the right time. Because, we're faced with these challenges on a daily, weekly basis, and we always have to be able to articulate the regulatory position as effectively as we can. And if there is an enforcement example, that's the best sort of evidence you have that whatever's being proposed in front of you is potentially an issue with FDA. So I built it, started in January last year, and then launched it right in the fall in September, right as this flurry of enforcement was happening. So I wasn't anticipating that, but the timing was very fortuitous.
Yeah, I'd say. It's amazing. Good coincidence. My goodness. I always think of it as like a trifecta when you're giving advice is to have the regs, obviously, primary guidance documents, and then the enforcement. Like they all kind of come together to help provide risk assessment and understanding. And yeah, why not learn from others' mishaps and go from there? So very helpful tool. Thank you. I think that's really important because I hear that a lot out there where people are like, oh, we've had lots of letters before, but this is different. We are truly in unprecedented times, and the letters are still an important tool in our toolbox. So we want them to be quality letters. I think quality versus quantity is always a good thing to think about, but that doesn't seem to be happening right now. And it's not just TV. I hear that a lot too. So sometimes they'll be like, oh, it's TV. If you're working in a smaller population on a rare disease or something, you might not be impacted. Well, that's not necessarily true. We've seen a big pattern in the time to events for oncology products. Jason did a nice deep dive on that. There is a lot to unpack here. And John, any closing thoughts for you?
I really tried to build a website that would be useful for everybody. So I would just love for everybody to be using it if you find it useful. It is a subscription website, but there's corporate clients too. I'm happy to give people free trials for as long as they need to evaluate it, see if it makes sense for their workflows, for their organizations. I did want to mention one thing also that given the focus on TV, I had pulled together back with the September 9th letters, all the TV ads that were cited by FDA in those letters where the TV ads were still available online. And I put them all on a free page on the site that anybody can look at and just watch the actual TV ad along with a summary of the letter. 34 videos that you can watch and just see the ads and see what FDA is reacting to. Because that's another notable development is that most of the promotional materials are not being provided by FDA. But luckily, a lot of them do survive on YouTube. So watched by us. And so we could get a better sense of what at least the current FDA is thinking with regard to distractions, for example, or text on screen during the major state. Those sorts of fundamental issues.
Or vacation spots, but also subjective. All right. This has been awesome. And thank you so much, John, for joining us. We really appreciate it. All right, Jane, this has been the Promotional Intelligence Podcast. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe, and we'll keep you posted on what comes next.